Good afternoon and welcome back to iProperty Radio live on site at the National Construction Summit here in Blanchardstown on day two. I'm delighted to be joined by Jenna Davis, Director of Government and Infrastructure with EY, and Barbara Robinson, Head of Organisational Development within Glenveagh. And I'm going to hand over to Jenna in your capacity as Chair of the Women's Infrastructure Network because so we're midway through day two. So much of day one and a half have been dominated not by construction but by infrastructure. So I want to hear what's happening, particularly through the Women's Infrastructure Network, but more broadly as well across EY, what your clients are experiencing.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And thanks for having us. The Women's Infrastructure Network was set up in Ireland. It's a more international organisation in many countries, originating in Canada, very active in the US, Australia, the UK, and set it up about 18 months ago, really to collaborate across the infrastructure lifecycle. And its sort of USP, unique selling point, is that it's for all professionals across the infrastructure lifecycle. So from people who the funding element, the legal side, procurement, and then what you more traditionally associate with construction, engineers like myself, and planners, and all the different professions that contribute to basically developing a required infrastructure for society. So that's the Women's Infrastructure Network. I suppose what's really come to the fore is how infrastructure in Ireland needs to be in a systematic and complete way. So, for example, if we're talking about the housing aspect, which has obviously been a huge focus of construction summit over the last day, there are all sorts of other aspects of infrastructure that are needed to support sustainable urban and rural growth in the housing sector to meet the demand that is needed for population growth and just the modernisation of old stock that you're talking about, all the derelict properties that we see around the country. But the other actual part is utilities, broadband, transport. So you have like developed areas that are great on paper, brilliant, but if you're not getting support from the rate of occupancy, if public transport, access to roads, you're not going to have a vibrant, integrated community that actually brings people benefit. So what I'm seeing in EY with our clients, which are broad across the private sector, semi-states, and the government departments, is that ecosystem approach to the investment in infrastructure. And what does that investment really mean? Well, it means opportunity and it means growth. And from growth comes skills and the requirement to build capability in this country. And I think if you want to see conversations we've been having over the last day and a half, is there's nothing but opportunity in the infrastructure sector in Ireland at the moment. But we need to meet that opportunity with the right career sets. And I think one of the things that has been really great about getting involved and hosting a panel here today was to be able to create a panel that represented the infrastructure life cycle and the varying professions from legal to planning, development, to construction, to engineering, and also the other skills around how you actually develop organizations to meet those challenges. And I was delighted that Barbara from Glenveagh would join on the panel to talk about how Glenveagh is meeting that challenge. I mean, we mentioned 20,000 houses is what you're minimum looking to deliver over the next year, 18 months, and then all the investment you're making in terms of buying MNC facilities, investment in your skill sets. It'd be great to hear more about that.
Yeah, it'll take a few more years than that to deliver on all those. Yeah, absolutely. I suppose it's a pleasure to be here and a pleasure to be a part of that panel. And part of having the necessary infrastructure is absolutely key for us delivering that. And really, I suppose our focus is on identifying the right training needs and delivering on them. So we have our about 20 sites. We have our 3 facilities with our timber frame and our light gauge steel. And we've really worked over the last, kind of 18 months to identify those key areas to work on, both the people side, the people development skills, and then also the technical skills as well. It's so broad. What we're doing, we've brought in, I suppose, really competent people into the organization. So we set up, we bought a manufacturing plant, but then we also set up a new one in Carlow, in the Brawn factory. And part of my role there was making sure we had competent people delivering on training. And then we brought in e-learns, we put our load the manuals for all the various machinery and all that, and created e-learns to make micro learns for people to really engage in it. But, so we could rinse and repeat, and that's what's really key for standardization, quality. It's really getting that. But also then, the people side of this, it's hugely important to assess people's comfort level in doing all these jobs, and that piece. We've done a lot around train the trainer, mentoring, getting people internally to be mentors, people internally to be coaches, and I think that's the shift that we've seen now over the last couple of months. Is really so when we focus on early careers, and that they're there to mind them when they come in, to help them focus and to give them their own development path, because there's just so much to be done that you just really have to hone in. So it's the design team, the innovation team, the manufacturing, the production line, what is it and what do they need? And it has to be skilled people there. A team, an L&D team can't do it for everybody. We just have to empower people in their individual areas to really grow.
No, I think that concept that you introduced earlier about the mentoring program in place, making that part of the organisational approach, and giving people the time and the resources to do that. It's something that we do a lot of requests through the Women's Infrastructure Network, and we have mentorship programs, we do this, we do that, and that piece about passing on the experience, encouraging and also making enthusiastic in the early stages of a career about what's possible, I think is really important.
Yes.
How do we make that part of the fabric of the sector?
Yeah, and I think mentoring, like I over the years, I've set up mentoring programs and train people to mentors and stuff. But ultimately, my own mentoring experience as a mentee has really been someone who's taken an interest in me. We get on well, we've chemistry together, they've walked my path, maybe 10 years before me, they've done senior roles and that. And really it's about encouraging people to go out and find that person at events like this, go out there, talk to people, find someone who can kind of, help you and guide you a little bit. That's not really, they've no other agenda, they're not working in the same business necessarily, and it's finding that. But sometimes when we want to, move people fast, we have to kind of bring those relationships together and force them a little bit more, which works as well. But it's a balance, and I really would encourage people, to find their own mentors. But also the coaching approach that we're trying to get the most out of people. So instead of maybe just training people how to do things, it's like trust people. They have their own insights, they have their own qualifications or whatever it is, their technical skills, and it's about coaching them for the best to come out of them, so they can do more, they can be more innovative, come up with more sustainable ideas and all that. And that's a real change from just do this and do that. That's how we do it. It's about using all the skills and tools that are there.
I love that approach, training, but it's training and trust.
Yes.
I haven't heard that articulated like that. In fact, all we've heard over the last day and a half has been around the skills gap from where we are to where we need to be. In terms of the skills gap commentary that is dominating the construction industry and MMC over the last number of years, it's where a bulk of government resources and sports are going to as well. On the ground, because Glenveagh has the different facilities there, and I'm really thinking of the Brawn facility, the old Carlow facility as well. What is your experience? Is the skills gap as severe as identified?
Well, I suppose we put a huge amount of work into getting the right people to train, and some of the team, when we initially set that up, they would have gone to various manufacturing plants around internationally to understand how they run, work really closely with the manufacturing and that. So really, I suppose what we've learned is that we have to grow from within. We have to develop those skills, and we have to do it really fast. So everybody, being at events like this and educating ourselves and that. So that's key.
I just recall on a stage at this very event last year, I was interviewing one of your colleagues, Tony McLaughlin, and he told a really interesting story about a facility in Carlow, which I shared so often over the past 12 months. So I'd love to hear about it from maybe a learning and development perspective. And that was around when we were having, a conversation touched on women in construction, and his point was very much, that's not an issue we have in Carlow, because the facility that we're operating out of traditionally had
Yes.
quite a high female operative quota. So actually that meant that when the facility reopened, even though they were no longer manufacturing electrical products, it was Braun and Carlo, now they were manufacturing homes. The people locally didn't really draw the distinction because
there's an appetite, there's a familiarity. My grandfather or my grandmother, we have a mother-daughter duo there, working there. So no, definitely there was an open arms. People really wanted to see the build with energy and again, and yeah, absolutely. When we talk about like building construction communities and that with our construction sites, it's the same there. Like we're interacting with schools and colleges, we bring FCTU in. And all that, so that's really important, to integrate with the community and really for them to feel it's an open place and it's an aspirational place to work.
So in terms of growing your pipeline of talent, do you find, because again, we've spoken a lot about attracting people into construction, infrastructure, and particularly on the construction side, it's seen as an industry that has not been good in advocating for itself or showcasing itself, and yet anybody within it will tell you there's a wonderful career in construction, irrespective of the discipline. So how has your experience been, because you're operating very much in that context on an MNC and the construction manufacturing side of things?
How is the experience in terms of the career paths and
being able to attract talent into the industry, retaining talent, and then growing that talent to ensure the skills gap is narrowing?
So we do a lot of work to really attract, and I suppose as a Glenveagh group across NUA as well, we our ED&I strategy, we have a campaign for a great place to we were winners of the Great Place to Work, our diversity, we have a goal in diversity, and we really do a lot of work around that and use network groups to really encourage diversity piece and everybody feels welcome, that there's something for everybody in the organization. So yeah, we do that, and we're rolling out some elements of that in the manufacturing as well, and that piece with the schools, talking to schools about careers, going to colleges, talking at career fairs, but also then having scholarships and traineeships and work experience. And we had transition years in recently into the office and showing them drones, showing them the timber frame, and really trying to get them to get a taste of what it's like. So yeah, huge amount of work to try and attract more people into it, and then when they come, to make sure they feel welcome and that they're minded, that mentoring minded opportunity.
It's the exciting thing, and Jenny, you said it so well, and you said there's nothing but opportunity in infrastructure right now. How is that attracting the talent we need, and where does that overlap with you actually establishing the Women's Infrastructure Network? Where did you see the need for that?
Yeah, there's probably two things. So just to go back to Glenveagh and the role of private developers in the housing sector, I think there's something around the product speaking for itself that does inspire people to get involved. There is, the youth in Ireland are acutely aware of how the housing crisis and also the kind of economic elements of living in a congested, not well serviced city. People want to work in Dublin, and how they're seeing what companies are actually making a change. And for example, when I hear about companies' end product in terms of the housing stock that's being provided, the energy efficiency, the sort of very clear step away from the original housing stock, that's what's inspiring people to get involved in construction and in particular kind of development, because they're seeing how it changes. Like there are developments around Dublin where you can actually see in a very short period of time an entire community being created, but people can also see their lifestyle in that. And I do think the sustainability piece is really, really inspiring. And a lot of people I'm talking to who are in their early stages of their career, considering, their next move after university, they are driven by sustainability and making sure that they are aligned value-wise with these companies. And I think being part of a solution-driven industry is really, really key. And then why did I think there was a need for the Women's Infrastructure Network? Well, I think there's always a need for women in sort of underrepresented sectors to have a forum in which we can drive. So one of the key things about that network is that it's women-led. I think that really landed very well, not just with the women in the sector, but the sector in general. there are a lot of women in leadership in infrastructure, and potentially we have a different approach, maybe a different style. We maybe haven't been part of developing over the last 50 years the construct of networking. We need to create our own. So that's where it's come from. Like, what do we want to be doing? And a lot of it is around, we want to have spaces where we can articulate our goals in the way that we feel is most authentic, but also in a where we understand that we have peers.
Yeah.
So, but I do want to go back to the importance of mentoring and me as a mentee, as you said, Barbara. I think there's a real value in having people who aren't like you mentoring you. And I think the advantage I've had being kind of a woman in a sector that is underrepresented by women. I've mainly worked in male-orientated environments. But I've gotten so much out of that in terms of the interest and the mentoring I've received. And I think there's a real responsibility and need for women to start providing that mentorship back towards the male cohort. Because they haven't had the privilege of learning what I've learned. So I have both sides of the coin. We need to be helping men see what they can learn from us in the sector. And I think it's been received really well. And also it goes back to the end product, right? Women and men are in this society. Things like the ergonomics of the kitchen. My mother's a very, very good example. She's 5 foot. Her architect is very good. Like 20 years ago, is 6'3".
Yeah.
She spent every day perfectly with me.
Yeah.
Because she did not have the understanding of what it's like to be a 5 foot woman in a kitchen.
Yeah.
And she can't reach things.
But I've had this conversation with Catherine Evans from Boldest Brass in the UK, and she is 5'2", and her mantra around PPE gear is that it's personal, and so her mantra is, women are not just small men. But I've said, as a woman of 6'2", I think we need to get even broader in our diversity pieces. And I think that conversation is one that we're only touching on at the moment. And yes, we have to start somewhere, and I'm delighted that that is the case. But
Designed for all.
Designed for all, absolutely, that's it. I'm delighted to learn more about the Women's Infrastructure Network, because I think it's a super organisation, or a super network. How do you get in contact with you to get involved?
Yeah, that's so we have a great and win-win-Ireland.com. If you just Google Women's Infrastructure Network Ireland, it'll come up. And also you can get in touch with me. My name's Glenveagh. I'm on LinkedIn. We have a LinkedIn page. Basically, as usual, Google is your friend, and we're very much at the top search.
Don't you just love it when an acronym works for you? That is a win. That is a win.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Barbara Robinson, Head of Organisational Development with Glenveagh, Gemma Davis, Director of Government and Infrastructure with NEY. Thank you both so much for joining me today, and enjoy the rest of the National Construction Summit here in Blanchardstown. Thank you so much. And so, welcome.